Oakland, 1966. A funeral home packed with mourners, and in the middle of it all, a moment that would become legendary. Not because of what was said, but because of what happened when arrogance met precision. This is the story of how Bruce Lee confronted organized crime at a dead man's funeral, and what went down in that back alley changed everything. Let me take you there. The man being buried was named Henry Wong, 52 years old. Heart gave out without warning. He ran a small Chinese restaurant in Oakland, the kind of place where the noodles were handmade and the owner knew your name. Henry wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but to the people who knew him, he was everything. Bruce Lee was one of those people. Back when Bruce first landed in America, he had nothing. No money, no connections, no safety net. Henry gave him hot meals when his stomach was empty, gave him a couch when he had nowhere to sleep, gave him belief when the world told him he'd never make it. That kind of kindness doesn't get forgotten. So when Henry died, Bruce showed up. Black suit, quiet respect. He owed the man that much. But the moment Bruce walked into that funeral home, something felt wrong. There were over 200 people crammed inside, elderly women clutching handkerchiefs, kids squirming in stiff clothes, men who worked brutal hours just to survive. These were people who lived honest, grinding lives, people who asked for nothing except to be left alone. And then there were the others, 6 men, standing near the casket like they owned the place. Designer suits that probably cost more than most people in that room earned in half a year. They whispered, they smirked. They acted like this was a social event instead of a goodbye to a dead man. Bruce knew the type immediately. Hong Kong had taught him to recognize predators. These weren't mourners. They were vultures circling a carcass. An old woman leaned toward Bruce and whispered the truth. They wanted his restaurant. Henry wouldn't sell. Now they're here waiting to pick the bones. Bruce said nothing, but he watched. Every move, every glance, every gesture. The biggest of the 6 was a mountain of a man, built like he'd been assembled from concrete and bad intentions. His name was Victor Rossi, and he worked as muscle for a crime syndicate that had been bleeding Oakland's Chinese businesses dry for years. Protection rackets, intimidation, the usual poison. Victor's eyes swept the room slowly, feeding on the fear he saw in every face. Then they landed on Bruce and stayed there. Bruce didn't flinch, didn't look away. He'd learned a long time ago that dropping your gaze was the same as surrendering, and Bruce Lee didn't surrender. Not to money, not to power, not to anyone. Victor muttered something to the man beside him. They both looked at Bruce and grinned like they were sharing a dirty joke. The service moved forward. The priest talked about Henry's generosity, his work ethic, his devotion to family. Bruce absorbed every word, but he never stopped tracking Victor in the corner of his vision. He watched the way the big man moved, the way he shifted his weight, the way he sized people up. When it came time to approach the casket, the 6 thugs shoved their way to the front. They bulldozed past grieving widows and crying children like they were clearing furniture out of a room. Nobody objected. Nobody dared. Victor reached the casket. He stared down at Henry's body for a long, quiet moment. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. And then Victor laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But Bruce saw it clear as daylight. Victor Rossi looked down at the man he'd tormented, the man whose family he'd terrorized, the man whose death was probably stress-induced, and he laughed like it was all some private comedy routine. The people around him pretended they didn't notice. They kept their eyes glued to the floor. Fear does that. It makes you small. It makes you invisible. It makes you survive another day. But Bruce had never been good at being small. He started walking toward the front of the room. The crowd parted without him asking. Something about the way Bruce moved, fluid, purposeful, like a river cutting through stone, made people step aside instinctively. They didn't know why. They just knew this wasn't a man you blocked. Victor noticed the movement. He turned from the casket and watched Bruce approach. His grin widened. He saw a small Chinese guy in a suit that didn't quite fit. He saw what he thought was easy prey. Well, Victor said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. You must be the guy who teaches rich folks how to kick. Bruce stopped 3 feet away. His face gave nothing. No anger, no fear. Just stillness. I heard about you, Victor continued. You teach that Chinese dance fighting to Hollywood actors, real impressive, real entertaining. His crew laughed right on cue. The Chinese mourners stayed silent, eyes locked on the ground. Nobody wanted attention. Nobody wanted to become the next target. "This is a funeral," Bruce said quietly. Victor raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Respect. I'm showing plenty of respect. I came all the way here to say goodbye to my friend Henry. That's respectful, isn't it? Henry wasn't your friend. No? And how would you know?" "Because he told me about you," Bruce said. His voice was calm, steady. "He told me you threatened to torch his restaurant if he didn't pay. He told me you broke his nephew's arm when the kid was late with the money. He told me you made his wife cry every month when you came to collect." The smile disappeared from Victor's face. His eyes went cold. "Henry had a big mouth," Victor said. "Maybe that's what gave him the heart attack, talking when he should have been paying." Bruce's hands tightened into fists, but he kept them at his sides. "Not yet. Not here. Not in front of Henry's casket." "Leave," Bruce said. "Leave now, and don't come back to this neighborhood, ever." Victor stared at him. For a second, his brain couldn't process what was happening. This small man was giving him orders. This skinny Chinese instructor was issuing threats. Then Victor burst out laughing. It was loud, ugly, and echoed off the walls. "Did you hear that, boys? The little dancer's telling me to leave." He stepped closer. Close enough that Bruce could smell stale cigarettes and garlic on his breath. "Listen here, you skinny little nothing. I weigh 240. I've killed men twice your size with my bare hands. I've snapped necks. I've crushed windpipes." Bruce didn't move, didn't blink, didn't step back. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Bruce said. Victor's face flushed red with rage. Nobody talked to him like this. Not in Oakland, not anywhere. "You know what?" Victor said. "I changed my mind. I'm not leaving, but you are. You're gonna walk out that door right now, or I'm gonna break every bone in your body. And when I'm done with you, I'm gonna visit your little kung fu school and burn it to the ground. Then I'm gonna find everyone you love and make them pay for your disrespect." The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped crying. Everyone was watching. Everyone knew they were witnessing something that would end badly for someone. Henry's widow stood near the casket, her face pale with terror. She'd buried her husband 3 days ago. Now she was about to watch a man get beaten to death at his funeral. Bruce glanced at her. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the same fear reflected in every face in the room. These people had lived under the shadow of men like Victor for years. They'd paid money they couldn't afford. They'd swallowed insults. They'd buried their pride just to survive one more day. It wasn't right. None of it was right. Bruce turned back to Victor. "Outside," Bruce said, "behind the building. Just you and me. No guns, no weapons, just hands." Victor laughed again, but this time there was a nervous edge to it. "You said you've killed men twice my size," Bruce said. "This should be easy for you, unless you're scared of a skinny little nothing." Victor's expression changed. Bruce had found the right button. In Victor's world, reputation was everything. If he backed down from a challenge, especially from a man half his size, he'd be finished. His crew would lose respect, his bosses would question his usefulness, his enemies would smell blood. "Fine," Victor said through clenched teeth. "Let's go, little man. I'm going to enjoy every second of this." The alley behind the funeral home was narrow and filthy, trash cans overflowing, a chain-link fence blocking the far end. No way out except through the door they'd just used. Victor's 5 men followed them outside. They spread along the brick wall, forming a semicircle. Bruce noticed 2 of them had their hands inside their jackets, resting on guns. If things went sideways, they were ready to end it fast. "Your friends can watch," Bruce said, "but they stay out of it. This is between you and me." Victor cracked his knuckles one by one. The sound bounced off the walls. "Don't worry about them," Victor said. "When I'm done with you, there won't be anything left for them to do. Maybe a few pieces to sweep up." He charged. Victor moved faster than Bruce expected for a big man. He threw a massive right hand that could have knocked down a wall. It would have shattered Bruce's skull like glass if it had connected. It didn't connect. Bruce moved to the side at the last possible moment. Victor's fist sailed through empty air, where Bruce's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Before Victor could recover his balance, Bruce's palm struck him in the center of his chest. It wasn't a hard hit. It didn't need to be. Bruce knew exactly where to strike. The precise point that would disrupt Victor's breathing, make his lungs seize for half a second, send a wave of panic through his nervous system. Victor stumbled backward, gasping. His eyes went wide with confusion. What had just happened? He'd thrown his best punch. He'd missed completely, and now he couldn't breathe. "That was a warning," Bruce said. His voice was still calm, still steady. "You can still walk away. Take your men. Leave Oakland. Never come back." Victor's face twisted with rage. He charged again, this time throwing a combination left hook, right cross, another left hook. Each punch was powerful enough to break bones. Each punch was thrown with murderous intent. None of them landed. Bruce weaved between the punches like smoke in a windstorm. He didn't block. He didn't retreat. He simply wasn't there when Victor's fists arrived. He was always 6 inches away, always just out of reach, always moving in ways Victor couldn't predict. Then Bruce decided it was time to end it. His first real strike hit the side of Victor's knee. The joint buckled sideways with a sickening sound. His second strike hit Victor's liver, a precise blow that sent waves of nauseating pain through the big man's body. Victor doubled over, unable to breathe, unable to think. His third strike, a short, sharp elbow, connected with Victor's jaw. Victor Rossi, the man who'd terrorized Oakland's Chinese community for 5 years, the man who claimed to have killed with his bare hands, dropped to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The whole fight lasted 8 seconds. Victor's men reached for their guns. "Don't," Bruce said. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. But something in his tone made them freeze. They'd just watched their boss, a man who'd beaten professional boxers in street fights, a man who'd put people in hospitals, a man who'd killed, get destroyed by someone half his size, and the Chinese man hadn't even broken a sweat. He wasn't breathing hard. He was standing there like nothing had happened. What chance did they have? Bruce walked over to Victor, who was lying on his back, groaning. Blood dripped from his mouth and nose. His eyes were unfocused. He was trying to understand what had happened, trying to figure out how he'd ended up on the ground. Bruce knelt beside him. "Can you hear me?" Bruce asked. Victor nodded weakly. His jaw was already swelling. "Good. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You're going to leave Oakland. You're going to tell your bosses that this neighborhood is no longer available for business. No more protection money, no more threats, no more broken arms, no more making widows cry. If anyone from your organization comes back here, anyone at all, I will know, and I will find them, and what I did to you today will seem gentle compared to what I'll do to them." Victor tried to speak, but only blood came out. "Blink if you understand," Bruce said. Victor blinked. Bruce stood up and looked at the 5 men against the wall. They were frozen in place, their hands still inside their jackets, their faces pale with shock and fear. "Take him to a hospital," Bruce said, his jaws broken. "Maybe some ribs too. He'll live, but he needs a doctor. And remember what you saw here today. Tell everyone. Tell your bosses. Tell anyone who asks. Tell them the Chinese community in Oakland is protected now. Tell them there's a price for disrespect." The men didn't move. They couldn't move. "Go," Bruce said. They went. 2 of them grabbed Victor under the arms and dragged him toward the alley entrance. His feet scraped along the concrete, leaving trails in the dirt. The others followed, walking backward, unable to take their eyes off Bruce. When they were gone, Bruce stood alone in the alley. He took a deep breath. He rolled his shoulders. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the effort of holding back. He'd wanted to do more. Much more. Victor Rossi had laughed at a dead man's body. He'd terrorized innocent people for years. He'd broken bones. He'd ruined lives. He deserved worse than a few fractures and some bruises. But Bruce had learned something important during his years of training. True strength wasn't about destroying your enemies. It was about controlling yourself. It was about using exactly as much force as necessary. No more, no less. Victor would live. He would heal. But he would never forget what happened in this alley. Every time he looked in the mirror, He'd remember the small Chinese man who'd humiliated him. Every time his jaw ached on cold mornings, he'd remember. And so would his men. And so would everyone they told. Sometimes the greatest victory is letting your enemy walk away with a story to tell. Bruce walked back inside the funeral home. The crowd was still there, frozen in the same positions they'd been in when he left. They stared at him like he was a ghost, like he was something supernatural that had walked among them. Henry Wong's widow approached him slowly. Her steps were hesitant. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also something else, something that looked like hope, something that looked like freedom. "Is it over?" she asked. "Yes," Bruce said. "They won't bother you again. I promise." She grabbed his hands. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Cow, thank you. Henry always said you were special. He always said you'd do great things. He was so proud to know you." Bruce shook his head. "Henry was the special one. He helped me when I had nothing. When I was just a young man with empty pockets and big dreams. This was the least I could do." The widow squeezed his hands tighter. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Will you stay for the rest of the service?" Bruce looked around the room. The fear was starting to fade from people's faces. They were looking at him differently now. Not with fear, not with pity, but with gratitude, with respect, with something that looked like pride. "Of course," Bruce said. "I came to say goodbye to my friend. I'm not leaving until that's done." The service resumed. The priest continued his prayers. People lined up to pay their respects to Henry Wong, this time without anyone cutting in line, without anyone showing disrespect. Something had changed in that room. The atmosphere was different. The heaviness had lifted. People stood straighter, they spoke louder, they looked each other in the eye. They weren't afraid anymore. When the service ended, Bruce walked with the procession to the cemetery. He stood at the graveside as they lowered Henry Wong into the ground. He watched as the first shovels of dirt covered the casket. He stayed until everyone else had left, until it was just him and the grave and the quiet. "Thank you, Henry," Bruce said softly, "for everything. I hope I made you proud today." A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling the flowers on the grave. It was gentle, almost like a hand patting him on the shoulder. Bruce smiled. He took it as a yes. He walked away from the cemetery that day and never looked back. There were other fights ahead, other challenges, other moments when he'd need to be ready. His life was just beginning, really. The world didn't know his name yet. That would come later. But he never forgot Henry Wong. He never forgot the lesson of that funeral. True strength isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about protecting the people who can't protect themselves. It's about standing up when everyone else is sitting down. It's about being the person others can count on when the world turns dark. Bruce Lee was many things to many people, but to the people who were at that funeral in Oakland in 1966, he was hope. And sometimes, hope is the most powerful weapon of all.